before I think Lori did a little bit of data cleanup that we should pay attention to.
Yeah, we can start with that. Hey, everybody, welcome to the January 30th biweekly working group LTS meeting. We're going to go over some survey data today. Should be super exciting. Thanks for sharing that, Lori. Let me pop that open and I can share my screen if we want to take a look at it that way. Let me pop myself into do not disturb though, so I don't get any random text from my spouse. Okay.
Were you done with your intro or should?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'll just put a little bit of a preface on this. So why I did anything here is because in SIG release, we've been talking about what work we should do in 2024. And some of that work includes making artifact validation more secure and reliable and looking at the tooling involved in the release process as part of that investigation, and then looking at the process itself. And from those discussions that we've had, it came up that this survey existed, and could we find anything in the survey results that might inform the SIG release work to improve the process and the tooling. So Jeremy shared the results with me. I looked at them and I made a bunch of charts picking the questions that you asked in the survey that seem to have some sort of promise in terms of informing the SIG release discussion. In the end, there wasn't too much here that we would use to answer some of the questions that we have in SIG release. So for example, about what people's expectations are around images and containers, and like granular details about signatures. Nothing like that is really in the survey results. But now you have a bunch of charts anyway. I did a little bit of data cleanup, but when I don't know what's going on, I don't do too much. So I'm very conservative in terms of keeping the precise wording that people used in place until you all decide if some of these responses can be consolidated. That will make the data more usable and easy to use, but as you can figure out. But for now, it's just pretty close to raw, except a little bit of consolidation.
Cool. Are these questions? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jordan.
I'm trying to keep track of where the canonical sheet is and which ones are copies of a sheet that have been.
This is a copy.
Copy.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't touch yours at all.
No, that's fine. The survey is technically open for like another day, so
yeah,
last-minute responses that come in. Okay.
Yeah, this is a copy. There are 5 tabs. The first is just like this random assortment of charts that I could make relatively small. Then there are 2 tabs that are specific questions where the list of responses is really long, and I just didn't mess around with them, and you can see everything as was reported by the respondents. The 4th tab is the raw data saved here. And then there's one tab called ignore where I was just messing around.
Cool.
So yeah, the first is what you would want to look.
Was there a link to that sheet somewhere?
I put
it's in the chat.
Too many windows. Thank you.
Yeah. I can put it in the agenda if the agenda for today is now spun up. Yep. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, that'd be useful for folks that are looking later
here.
on. So these 2 tabs are 2 of the free-form questions. Is that correct?
The first tab is an assortment that I could fit easily as cornucopia style. The second and the third tabs are 1 question each tab.
Okay.
And you'll see there's a long, like there you go. So it's imposed over the data. So, if you change the data inside the cell, then it would change the result of that chart. On that one, I actually, people were providing all sorts of percentages. It was like, how much is your process automated? And it was like 5, 10, 15. I mean, the whole gamut. So I just went from 0 to 25. I did it in quarters. all the way up to 100. Like I did 76 to 99, and then I did 100% to keep that separate. Like the whole thing is automated. So you could target those users right away.
Did a lot of people report themselves as being 100% automated?
You can see there, I guess it must be, yeah, quite a bit, 21. So,
Surprising.
and then, in the more detailed information, you might see like, if they said something like fully automated, except this thing over here, I didn't include it in the simplified brackets. I kept it as is. So you might want to decide to put them in one of those buckets.
Gotcha.
Okay, so this is pretty useful, I think, for some of this data analysis. Do we want to look at individual questions too and determine if any of those are ones we want to focus on? So we've got a number of free-form things. Describe your current upgrade process. To what degree is it automated? Ideal. Like those are, and then we got a bunch again that are like constrained mostly. We let people add things, so there are some kind of outliers. And then this column,
Oh yeah,
other feedback.
thanks.
So I think we originally were interested in this topic to understand before we considered if we wanted to consider LTS or not for the community. We wanted to understand better about what the upgrade challenges were for folks and what the big areas of focus that we needed to look into were. Am I correct in kind of stating that, Jordan? Is that your opinion too?
Yeah, like where are people stuck? What are they stuck on? And then some of the questions about how they're upgrading to understand if some of the improvements we could make for the things they're currently stuck on would even be applicable to the method they're using. At that point, you might almost need to start like matching up. This person was stuck on this, and this is the method they're using.
Yeah, some more cross analysis between.
Knowing when they're stuck would be super helpful because we've made a lot of improvements. And like if people are stuck on like 121, then maybe the reason they're stuck has already been addressed, and like getting past that hump is actually the more useful thing we could do, like documentation, tooling, and things to help them get to actually current versions. If they're stuck on like current versions where we think we've already improved things, then we might do different things to help them.
Something that stands out is I just looked through the charts section, and the what does long-term support of Kubernetes mean to you down on like line 130 through 150 on the right-hand side. It is far and away people care about critical bugs and security, but also they want those skip level upgrades. And so that might tie into what Jordan was just saying of the things that have been improved is people want to go, or when I say they want skip level upgrades, I'm inferring that based on the fact they want to go from LTS to LTS. So I don't know if does that tie in, Jordan, with what you were just saying about like the things we're already fixing or have improved?
Possibly.
I think that there's some work, in flight in that area. Like them making it easier to do upgrades.
Yeah.
That particular question seems like one that if we could cross-reference that with like how often those people say that they would want to, that would be a good area to dig into.
Yeah, and there's two ways to make it possible to upgrade from every LTS version to every other LTS version. One is to just not declare special LTS versions and say every version gets supported for longer. So they're all LTS versions now. And so you can upgrade from any one to the next one, but that's probably not what people who answer that question want.
Probably not.
All right. We will probably have time to get through about one freeform text bucketing question. So if we wanted to start with one, is it more useful to look at what they're currently doing or like what they're blocked on?
Probably what they're blocked on. I think that's what folks' biggest challenge. This one isn't free form text though, right? Like this is.
Biggest challenges has a lot of, yeah, that's freeform text.
The
Okay.
chart,
The chart has that.
row 80, column W is what part of the upgrade process is most complex and time consuming. If you look, some of these I just like, if people answered a few things, I broke those out so that each thing would be recorded on its own and lumped in with the, on the topic. So like here you see preparing for the upgrade, reading change logs, qualification process is far and away the most complex and time consuming part.
And that's people trying to figure out if they're going to break, right?
There's also biggest column Z below it. What are your biggest challenges or blockers with upgrading? And then you get disruption during our upgrade, the time to prepare.
Built-in Kubernetes API is going away.
Yeah, deployed third party, something. Heartbreaking changes. Like I think we need to.
To Scott's point about cross correlation, it'd be interesting to see, are the people who are worried about Kubernetes APIs going away also hoping to jump several versions? Because that usually doesn't like completely hit you in one version. It's usually like slowly an API goes away.
So at least at least in my world, everybody's scared because pod security policies got deprecated, and that kind of change doesn't happen very often. So everybody's scared that that's happening again. So they're obsessive. Like every release, we have the conversations. I'm like, no, here's the list 3 versions ahead of what's coming, what's going. Like we're good. That kind of change doesn't happen very often. But I think everybody's just gun shy now because there's been one big one, and
Yeah, I mean, we will never again have a beta API that's on by default that goes away. So we are 100% sure about that. So if you consume clusters with defaults, that will never happen to you again. You have to opt yourself into that situation intentionally. Biggest challengers and blockers, it looks like we had several things that we identified, but then there was like an other option.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be like a concrete place to start. Like look at those other responses and see if any of them bucket into the options we actually gave people, or if there were themes in freeform that which means we sort of forgot a category.
Okay, so things in here that are free form, do we want to like mark them with a different color so we can easily find them, or just go through and somebody's going to take notes as we're going? So these 2 are free form. Regressions and
I feel like
disruptions.
using a highlight in the sheet is probably going to be the fastest way to make sure you've noted it. And you can't sort on highlighting, but whatever.
Yeah.
Did we only? I'm not 100% sure if
we can look at the form and see what's there.
The summary, I think, will pull out the ones that we had and then show us there were maybe 15 freeform ones.
Yeah, there we go. There are the built-ins. It's reloaded. That's annoying.
here we are displaying our ignorance of how to work with
sheets.
sheets and survey responses. The screen I'm looking at, I just pasted into the notes. That seems to, if you want to jump over to the agenda, that seemed to pull out the options we gave and show the long tail.
Okay.
I think if we
I'm
just
also-
sorted the sheet based on that column, you'll get all the ones that are common showing up in big blocks, and then you'll just have individual ones that we could maybe review and say, this is close to that one or something like that.
How about this? I will copy the column to a new sheet so we don't screw up form responses.
Okay.
Paste that, do Scott's suggestion, sort sheet.
And I'm reading down the list and thinking deprecated features, regressions, disruption, like they're subtly different, but it all kind of accrues to you made my day worse. Like this was horrible and broke when I just wanted to be compliant or improve. It seems to be the sentiment.
Okay.
Here's what I might do is I might try to tell some stories by putting some of the results together to piece like kind of the landscape that people are working in. Maybe there are a couple common scenarios, and then making charts for the other questions that I didn't make charts for. So you have a complete set. And then coming back to this meeting with some of those scenarios described, like here are the breaking changes that people are concerned about. Here's what's holding them back. Here's what version they tend to be on. So the issues are new or old. Like just there's
That's
a lot
good
of
point,
data.
Lori.
And I
Like the
think
scenario analysis, I think, is a good point.
yeah, there's just so much data here that I think to try to crunch it in this space at this level of scatteredness won't be the most effective use of time. So I'm happy to work with whomever here to like do some of that scenario building for the next meeting. And I can also make the rest of the charts. I can rerun them too with the newer responses. So we have the full set.
So I have a question, maybe for our chairs as we're digging into this. Are we hoping that we get information that helps us determine how LTS should work, or if LTS should work? Like which information the surfacing of which information would be the most useful?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to answer. We have to answer that question first, right? Like, is community LTS something that we want to consider? Yes or no? I think answering that question really will drive any other discussions around that. So I'm curious what others think are the criteria that would answer that question. What are the factors that would say yes or absolutely no?
I think it's like, what core problem are you trying to solve with anything here? And then if there's a couple core problems for different types of respondents, like you can have a couple then, but I should start with why did this survey exist in the first place? What were you setting out to solve?
We were trying to understand, are people still a common like assumption that we made going into this was that people, I think, and probably that drives the LTS discussion is people have a hard time upgrading. People are stuck on older versions. People are interested in. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying people exist in corporations that patching every 4 months is just too aggressive and they can't keep up. I think that's a lot of it. So yeah, we can definitely go through and we can probably find scenarios that people want to update once a year, and we need either a path for them to do that or a simple way for them to do the 3-step jump they do today. Like it's just to kind of help people down those paths, or to
Mm.
figure out a plan to make the platform handle those scenarios better.
So
Yeah,
think
there are assumptions that like people want to jump, or people are stuck, or people want like there's a cadence that people have in mind. Like we all kind of have our own view of like what is LTS, what's the cadence, what's the total lifetime. And so I think the questions we were trying to answer here were like, is there a shared sense of like how long is long enough, and how frequent is frequent enough, and what are the blockers? So this is the wants and needs part. Like what it would cost to actually do it is an entirely different
discussion. Yeah.
discussion. But this would at least, like, we all say LTS and think something, and this is trying to understand like what's the shared understanding.
So some people responded that they're fine with the current process. It's perfect. Don't change anything. Other people are saying, I want to fire and forget. I don't want to even have to think about this. So you see the full range. So it'd be interesting to go and maybe plot on a spectrum from leave it alone, it's fine, all the way to I have a terrible time.
Yeah.
Here's why.
We
could
it's
put that
also
story together.
helpful to like, we hear things about like regulatory environments,
Yeah.
and it's difficult to get a sense for how representative that is. Like you don't hear from the users you don't have, and so
Yeah.
again, like this is only 250-ish responses, so this isn't exhaustive in any way, but it's something.
So about the regulatory constraints, that's column G, and that chart shows that people either have none, that's the majority, and then second is PCI and SOC 2, and then you have 34 people saying, I don't know, then FedRAMP, and then you have like some of these one-offs, which either could mean or be part of one of the more
Yeah. I think some of
popular.
these roll up under that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
So
that might be a useful thing to bucket in terms of like delay or qualification or certification time. Like the relevant question I have about that chart is how much lag does that add before you can pick up a new version?
yeah,
That one's challenging because like FedRAMP is one where like FIPS gets entangled there, and people can pursue delivering FIPS potentially in a way that creates no lag. The way Red Hat has done it, we move forward with current OS versions, and current OS versions they're submitted for FIPS, and then it takes like a year, 2 years. So that can potentially introduce lag, or, depending on how you approach FIPS,
Yeah,
you could avoid that.
And OpenSSL3 helps because of the way it's modular now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's regulation itself doesn't introduce lag once you're in it. It's getting there. Like it can take a year to get some of the certifications for your platform or product you're running on top of Kubernetes, and then so you're already end of life the day you go live, right? Which is why that's for regulation. That's the problem. Once you're live, you can upgrade as much as you want, but you can't touch it while you're going through the process.
Is that accurate? I had heard people claim to be under regulatory constraints where each new version they wanted to pick up essentially had to restart the process.
Yeah, some of them are like that. Which is why OpenSSL v3 is nice, because you can not touch the cryptography module now and upgrade everything else for FIPS specifically.
In terms of like trying to understand if there's a thing the community can afford that would help the people who are saying they want LTS. What we want to avoid is going to great expense and difficulty and saying like, all right, we gave you another year of support, and then have like a majority of the people who are saying we need this because of regulatory reasons, whatever, come back and say, oh, 2 years isn't nearly long enough. We need 5 years. Something like that.
There's no amount of time we can give people that are in the regulatory world that'll make them happy.
That's
I can say that inside Dell, we do 24 months, or we do between 18 and 24 months for Kubernetes, and we've got people asking for 5 years, right? Like that group is never happy. We just need to give them a way that they can do bigger jumps. At least that's the approach we come up with, is which gets into the evaluating prerequisites, and you tend to spend a lot of time planning your upgrades because you got to make sure that no APIs are going to break when you do that jump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons swirling around, and we're trying to sort of take each one in turn and say, like, what can we do? What would actually help you? Would this be sufficient? Is what I'm trying to untangle from all this.
So what I would do there is, like I said earlier, building some scenarios. It's also
Mhm.
possible to take every question and kind of create a flow chart where you have, like we can just make the data more obvious. Like there's questions about upgrading time. There's questions about blockers. There's questions about constraints. So we could map that in a way using these questions and the results, and then kind of summarize the top answers for the individual questions in those kind of buckets. And that will be a lot easier to look at. And it can put a framework for some of the details that you're looking at with like those short answer questions. But I think getting the overall picture and having a easy to consume framework for this information would be the next step to take. And then come back here next time with that in hand and have a much more organized conversation.
I think having those scenarios would be useful. Like one that stands out to me now, based off of the discussion that just happened, was
Mhm.
could we look at the scenario for those folks that have regulatory constraints and see what the common themes that pop out for that are?
Yeah.
So I'm in favor of doing that. I'd be happy to work with you to work on that
Cool.
too, if you want to pair up to do some of that.
We can
Um,
then segment those responses out, like, and just look at like whoever is responding with PCI or FedRAMP. We can just look at those and on their own and dig deeper. That will be helpful. Okay.
do we have an idea ahead of time, like which scenarios we're interested in looking at to try to bucket things, or will we try to derive that from the data itself?
I might look at people who are happy with the current process as one persona. I might look at people who are really stuck. Like, you have some people, how long does it take? And it's taking them a really long time.
People
Or they
who have
just
really
don't do
old
it at all.
versions. People who
Mhm.
have really old versions go into your group of stuck.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one too.
Yeah,
People.
now, and I was curious how many people are stuck or self-managed, cloud-based, or on premises, because those are different kind of. Because if you're stuck and you're on a cloud like AWS, you would only have so long of a window before they just turn you off, right? So
Well, and there's nuance there too, because
Yeah.
there's like the managed services have certain cadences, and then you might be using a cloud but self-managing something on there, and that may not have any safeguards. You just might end up in a situation.
Mhm.
Like in some cases, it almost doesn't matter whose premises or whatever it's on, as long as is somebody else making you upgrade or not, or is somebody else providing the path or not.
Yeah. I'm going to drop these scenarios into the notes. Let's see.
I was trying to sketch some of those out, but feel free
Yeah.
to.
I can't add them. I'm pasting and it's not.
Oh, really?
I have to have edit access. Okay.
You need to join the
You should join the
mailing
work-
list to
Here you
get
go.
that.
I just sent for a request.
Yeah, if you join the mailing list, everyone on the mailing list has edit access.
Okay. If you. Yeah. That too. But we have 3 so far, just FYI.
I missed the one you just said, Bridget. Something about provider.
Oh, people who are stuck because they're self-managing versus people who are trying to keep up with the cadence of whatever their provider's doing. I'm not sure if we want to, if those are two sides of the same coin or not, but that's a place where we'll see a difference is people whose cadence, maybe the right way to put that is people whose cadence for upgrade is being set by themselves or by their provider. I think at least the evidence that I see inside with both managed and unmanaged services is both lead to struggles, but they manifest in different ways. Like a self-managed group might just never upgrade or be super far behind. Whereas like somebody with a managed service might end up with clusters they don't want to get rid of because any new cluster, they would have to do the new thing on. And so they might cling to an old cluster because it's grandfathered in. It's like there's a lot of anti-patterns there.
Yeah, okay, I'm allowed to put comments here, so I'm going to call this one scenario 4 users happy. So we have the 4 listed, including the one Bridges is described. Regulatory.
Actually,
oh, go ahead.
I have a question. After looking just a few minutes of looking at the data that I'm seeing here, I'm kind of realizing that there are people who want, like the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, basically. There are people who do want to upgrade and have trouble with it. And there are other people who don't want to upgrade, but they are either doing someone else's bidding or trying to stay out of, the pitfall of like everything broke on me. So it's like the bare minimum upgrade strategy. Like, I'm just here so I don't get fined.
As late as possible, as rarely as possible. Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 6.
Hello. I think I have another scenario that I'm not sure if it is only in China, because the decision maker is not always the ops guy, but always the application owner. So if the ops want to upgrade, they must get approved by the application owners. That is a big. They always get denied, or they have the ops have to miss. There's no problem with upgrade. It may be a story.
That's
Yeah,
a
I don't
good
know
point. Stakeholder, yeah.
Yeah, that is a good one. I don't know if we asked any questions specifically to address that, but it would be interesting to see if there's any of the freeform answers that come out of that, and then wire that back. I'd be interested to see that.
So we have 7 proposed scenarios so far. Would we want to create like sub distinguishing factors within any of those scenarios, like old version versus new version, fine experience versus poor experience? How would you segment or break them down further, if at all?
I kind of want to go back to the question we're trying to solve, which is like, what is motivating people to upgrade or not upgrade? What's preventing people from upgrading or not upgrading? So it's like you have kind of some kind of Rumsfeldian access of like they want to upgrade, but they can't. Like your willingness versus like your ability.
And look at that for each one of those scenarios.
Yeah, like do you want to? And are you able to? That might be overly simplistic, but I think that's stuff we can at least try to come up with.
For each of these patterns, there are usually things that they can do. So like if someone only wants to upgrade once a year They don't want to upgrade every 4 months. They don't want to stack upgrades. They don't, don't want to do any of that. There's a pattern for like create a cluster when the version shows up, use its full support window, and then a year later create another cluster on whatever the current version is and move workloads from one to the other. Like that's a pattern that can exist. It puts constraints on your workloads, but I think for each of these, like identifying the problems people are having, identifying what solutions to those problems exist.
Yeah.
Do they know about those? Is there a reason those solutions aren't being used, can't be used? Like,
and the one you just described is a great example of blue-green is wonderful if you have enough estate to be able to be almost, doubled in size.
And your
And some people
applications can handle
cannot.
it.
And your applications can handle it, and your data sources can handle it.
yeah.
It's a multi-factor problem. But that's a good thing to add in here, I think. I think, are they aware of the solutions? That's potentially hard to know from this data, but from their answers, I think we can infer whether some of those would be possible or not. Like one of the answers was we don't have enough capacity to spin up new clusters. Like I saw that in one of the answers. That's a perfectly good reason why like you couldn't do a migration like that, because you just don't have space. Like we had that problem at my previous employer, that there was just no capacity and you couldn't make new clusters to do anything because there were just no space. Folks that are in the cloud, probably not as much. So I think we can probably infer that from some of the responses. It'd probably be good to try to do that from, and also identify like we can't really make any inferences. Call that out too.
Yeah, but as a project, like we're trying to decide, do we have a good answer for people? And like if we have a good, people who want to upgrade rarely and have capacity to do this and don't have capacity to do this. Okay, we have an answer for these folks. We don't have an answer for these folks.
Right.
Like,
But I think we have to put an asterisk by an answer if our answer is just spend twice as much money, because I don't think people are going to love that answer.
Right. And then if they're self-managed in any way, they might want to do in-place upgrades. Then space and capacity is not an issue, but the features and feature gates and all that kind of stuff becomes a bigger issue for checks. So yeah, we yeah, there's stories to figure out here, and then we address when we can prioritize which ones make sense to document or build plans around.
It looked like from Lori's charts that we were seeing that more people are unmanaged than not, but there's still a significant number of people on self-managed. So I think we probably can't just stick to one or the other of those user stories because they're both pretty significant in number.
Yeah, I think so. We're almost at time. So it sounds like next steps for us, Lori and I, and we can put the doodle out if anybody else wants to join us. We'll look through to try to map these scenarios through with the data and bucketize things across the responses that way, trying to answer the start with questions and then anything Jordan has added underneath the scenarios. And we'll bring that back for next time. Anything else we want to focus on for next time? Any homework that anybody wants to do?
I'll just point out that column AB is the hinge or one hinge between this group and the SIG release group. And that question was about, I just want to give it verbatim. What does long-term support of Kubernetes mean for you? And that's about reduced update cadence, but also the security patching. So that's where the two groups intersect. And just keep it in mind as we go, because that can be where both groups kind of can collaborate.
Thank you for pointing that out explicitly, because I think that's a very important point. It's like why do people do an update? They might be looking for new features, but probably they just have to stay safe.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll put that in the notes at the top, like let's dig into that question and think about the framing there that it provides.
we had that question explicitly, why are clusters upgraded? And security updates, I mean, so that some of these have multiple answers, like security updates, new features due to lifecycle. Security updates looks like it definitely has a pretty cross-cutting. If you just exclude everything else and bucketed it on security by itself, that would be a pretty overwhelming response. And then lifecycle and support windows looks like a pretty outstanding too.
Which are all probably tied together.
Yeah.
You need longer support windows for your security updates that you're getting told to apply.
All right. Well, I'll send a doodle out. And if anybody wants to join, Laurie and I will pick a time, and then y'all can join us and we can crunch some data. Thanks for
Let's-
volunteering to do that, Laurie. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's shoot for next week because FOSDEM is happening.
Lucky.
So I won't be around for that. So Monday and beyond.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Hope everybody has a great rest of your Tuesday or Wednesday if it's Wednesday already. See ya.